Hello everyone, welcome back to a video here on Play on GAA with me, your host Seamus Brady, and for this video I am joined by sports commentator Oisin Langan. Oisin, another brilliant weekend of club action. What did you make of it?
Yeah, fantastic. As always, there's stories you can dig out regards family, regards long waits ending, regards just good games, some teams coming to the end of their season and kind of reflecting. For some teams, it's strange at this time of year. If they go out in the provincial championship, you'd say, you know what, they still had a good year. But there's other teams, if they go out at this stage, you'd say wasn't as good as it should be, or could do better, or you'd expect more from them. And there was one or two surprises as well. So we had a bit of everything.
Yeah, no, we certainly did. And I agree with what you said about the different standards for different teams. I mean, there were teams that were getting touted as All-Ireland contenders that didn't even make it out of their county. I mean, you're talking about Belly and Moyloch, they got knocked out by Moycullen. But yeah, just surprises being thrown up left, right, and centre. We're going to start with the action which took place in the club hurling championship, namely Ballygunner's really impressive victory over Kilruane MacDonaghs. I mean, this was a Kilruane side that had just bridged a 37-year gap in Tipperary. They just ended the famine there. They would have been coming in with some serious confidence. The likes of Jerome Cahill that's in their side, the Niall O'Mara at centre back, and yet Ballygunner just really reminded us all just how good they are.
I think you kind of hit it there when you said they ended a 37-year wait. That only ended last weekend. Ideally for them, regards to the AIB Munster Club Championship, it would have ended the week before, so they could have had a celebration and got themselves right. I don't think a week was enough for them. They would have been tired anyway, even if they'd won 10 in a row and won the title last weekend, and obviously that wouldn't mean as much to you as it would ending a famine like they did. If they would have struggled to prepare even if that was the case. So fatigue caught them. I think Ballygunner are a better team. You'd fancy Ballygunner anyway. Ballygunner had a bit of a gap, but they knew how to handle that from previous years. And a lot of their players actually played very competitive football. They got to the semi-final in the Senior Club Championship. A lot of the Ballygunner lads would play football with Galtier. So they would have had that kind of sharpness. They would have had that strength and conditioning coming in, because that's one thing that any hurler will tell you. They'll play football because they actually get great fitness out of it. So they were more than ready despite the gap. And Kilruane MacDonaghs, and you couldn't blame them, and I don't think there was any way around it. They just weren't ready. They just, they weren't able to match Ballygunner's intensity, and you couldn't blame them for that. They're one of the clubs I was talking about that had a great year, even though they made no impact in the provincial championship, and I wouldn't blame them for that. Circumstances went against them. If they got Ballygunner at a better time, maybe they would have done better. Maybe they might have even beaten them. But there was no surprise for me to see Ballygunner do what they did. And look, it's still been a great year for Kilruane MacDonaghs. No one can take the county title away from them. Would they like to have won the weekend? Yeah, of course they would. But they were coming up against probably the one team you would like to avoid if you were in that situation, coming in off an emotionally draining final last week and a physically draining final last week. It was the perfect storm for Kilruane MacDonaghs in a negative sense for preparation for a high intensity game. And look, the circumstances told. It was no great surprise to see them beaten like they were.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree completely with the point of Ballygunner's season doesn't stop at winning the Waterford title. They are all about reclaiming that All-Ireland club title. And the fact that they did have a little bit more to rest than Kilruane, I think definitely played into it. It was played in Walsh Park as well. I mean, that benefits the likes of Desi Hutchinson, that benefits Pádraig Mahoney, who play there at Waterford all the time. I know the Tipperary do have a lot of games there, but I do think that they had, the lion's share of advantages. But still, to win by 4-19 to 14 points is hugely impressive. I mean, this is off the back of Nipirshig, swatting aside Kilmallock. That's actually the team that they're playing against next. And just give a shout out to the people that stood out in this game. Kevin Mahoney obviously hit 2-2. Harry Ruddle hit a goal as well. And 18-year-old Patrick Fitzgerald with a goal and 4 points. I mean, for a youngster, what a way to make your mark.
And Seamus, that's the thing about Ballygunner. It's not like they've had this dominance, the 9 in a row in Waterford and the 2 Munster titles and 1 All-Ireland title. It's not like that's all been the same players. There's actually been an evolution of the squad there. And you mentioned Harry Ruddle. We all remember what Harry did in the club final last year, scoring that goal. Harry wasn't even in the senior team in Waterford. Harry played in the intermediate final against Ballysaggart. I went down to Farrfield. I actually live fairly close to Farrfield now, but just do one thing or another and covering the Dublin Championship, I actually don't get to watch a whole pile of Waterford Club Championship, not live anyway, and not at grounds. And I looked at the team sheet and I said, what's Harry Ruddle doing in here? And like, it's not like he had any mass injury issues or anything. It's just that competitive in the Ballygunner squad. So they've done this, and they've had the success they've had with different managers and a lot of different players. There's some constants, but there's a lot of change as well. That's what makes it all the more impressive. And the Piercing will be a really stiff challenge for the next up. Now, I'm kind of flying blind here because I haven't seen a whole pile of the Piercing. I'll get to watch them before that game. I would have some of their games recorded and available to me to watch back. But again, you know it yourself, when you're actually covering games in a championship, that championship has to be your primary focus. And then obviously I have my League of Ireland stuff as well. So it's actually quite difficult to squeeze in time to watch games you're not covering. And I haven't got to cover the Piercing yet. Obviously I will do in a couple of weeks, but it'll be a stiffer challenge. But again, look, you have to look at that Ballygunner game last weekend with an asterisk, and the asterisk is that Kilruane MacDonaghs they were tired going into it.
Yeah, and I do think that in the Piercing going into that game, the Piercing are going to be more focused on, we're not stopping at the Limerick. They have the players 100% to go for an All-Ireland. They've got Mike Casey. And if Jerome Boylan, I think if he slots back in, on top of the fact that they have the likes of Peter Casey and Kevin Downs in the forwards, if Jerome Boylan comes back in, that would be Jerome Boylan and Mike Casey, two elite man markers. And they could potentially take out your Desi Hutchinson and your Porrick Mahoney. And that could be a real game changer. Like, Ballygunner and the Piercing next is an absolutely outrageous game.
Yeah, but look at the players Ballygunner still have, even if you take out the two lads that you just mentioned. Peter Casey, but a great story with Peter as well. The work he's put in to, I suppose, getting to where he was and bouncing back after his injury and everything like that. I'm expecting a really, really good tussle. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is as well, the winter conditions, it kind of throws in that battle element as well. Now, look, physicality is a big part of hurling regardless of time of year, but it's very different. It's a very different style of hurling to what it would be in the height of the summer. And that's one thing that maybe Ballygunner got caught on a few years in the Munster Club Championship. They dominated teams in Waterford too much, so they never had to kind of dig deep, like really dig deep. But what was impressive about them when they won Munster a couple of years ago, not last year now, but a couple of years ago, they did. And last year, it was the same. And they found a way to win games. And when they lost to Borris-Lee that time, they didn't find a way to win. But I think they really learned from that. Like, I think they took lessons as a club. And as I said, it's been changed since, but they took lessons as a club. And sometimes it's not even okay, lads, this is what happened in this game, and this is what we'll do to avoid that this time. Sometimes you just have to go through the experience. You have to go through the hurt. You have to go through the actual experience of playing the game, how you play it, and what you need to do. It's an intangible, is what I would suggest.
Yeah, and the other asterisk that I would add to that is Ballygunner going into this game, physicality will be more important given the winter conditions. The Piercing have probably the best midfield general in the entire country in Will O'Donoghue. I mean, he's the Roy Keane of that Limerick team. He is the absolute on-field captain, the general of that midfield. He dominates every midfield battle he's in. So for Ballygunner, that's a huge, huge problem if they don't have someone that can match up to Will O'Donoghue, because Waterford don't have anyone that can match up to Will O'Donoghue. That was why there was so much hope put on Cormac Daly when he broke through last season. I was saying, can someone go toe-to-toe with this guy? Because he's dominating every game he plays. That's a big factor, I think.
Well, funny enough, if we go on the last fixture in the championship between Waterford and Limerick, it's kind of a funny one. You nearly have to ignore what came after it. But I think what went wrong for Waterford went wrong well before the Cork and Clare games. They kind of, outside of Kilkenny, and Galway gave them a good game as well, but Waterford did bring Limerick pretty close last year. Now, maybe you can say, did they really, or was it a bit of a late rally? But it would suggest that Waterford are not that far away, and they just got their prep wrong for the Cork and Clare games, and they got their prep wrong for just the championship module and structure. And it's easy to sit here and say they got it wrong. It's very hard to actually get it right, especially when it was the first normal championship in quite some time. And look, Liam Cal did a fantastic job with Waterford, like absolutely fantastic. I was very sad to see him go, I have to say. and I'd have liked him to stay. But look, you couldn't blame a guy for taking a job in his own county and managing his own county, especially when there's a lot of talent and he's managing a lot of those players and has managed a lot of those players. But look, Davy's in now, he'll do a good job. But my point is well, it's kind of a mute point because I'm talking more about Waterford than Ballygunner, but maybe some of the Ballygunner lads will look and take confidence from that day and say, well, okay, you know what, the championship went wrong. But when you actually look at the game against Limerick, and Will O'Donoghue was part of that, then maybe, just maybe, we can do something here.
Yeah, well, that was, to me, that was the moment that I knew Limerick were just, the mettle was just unquestioned. Because if, like, let's spin back the clock to that time, Waterford were being talked up by everyone as being Limerick's direct rivals for the All-Ireland. They had just beaten Tipperary. Yes, not the most pretty, but then they hit 2 goals in the last few minutes to bring Limerick back to 2 points? And Limerick go down and hit the next 3 points without reply. That's when I was like, right, these guys are just, there's no task that they haven't overcome. And that's why I think people underestimated how good Clare were last year. Look, just things didn't fall into place. Anyway, doing a complete switch, going to the football action.
Sorry, I know Clare people will pick me up. I appreciate Clare brought Limerick close as well in that Munster final. So look, Clare, Waterford, Galway, Kilkenny, they can all say they brought Limerick close. So maybe I'm taking too much hope out of a round robin game that we effectively lost, like you say, when Limerick had to, they saw it home.
Going up then to Ulster, going to the Ulster Football Championship. Ballybay, 2 goals and 11 points. Crossmaglen Rangers, a goal and 9. A huge third quarter was crucial in Ballybay's victory. Darragh O'Callaghan was black-carded for Crossmaglen on the stroke of half-time. And in that third quarter, Ballybay hit a goal and 5 to Crossmaglen's 1 point. I mean, Crossmaglen, I didn't see this coming, I have to say. Look, even though Ballybay have like the Wiley brothers and they have Desi Ward and they have, you know, an evergreen Paul Finlay, I still thought, look, Rian O'Neill, Keane McConville, Jamie Clark, that forward line is too strong. Surely Crossmaglen get through, but they got caught.
It's only any use if you get the ball into them, and they didn't in the second half. I thought, and it was a point that was brought up by Enda McGinley on co-commentary on RTE television, they were very naive maybe in how they approached that second half, and they didn't factor in the breeze. They didn't factor in a very strong breeze. And Ballybay, I didn't realise it while watching it in the first half. I came to it a kind of couple of minutes in because I've been watching the rugby, that the breeze was so strong. But Ballybay, I mean, you can talk about Paul Finlay, and rightfully so, but the McGuinnesses and Desi Ward and all these guys who've got county experience, there's county experience all over that team. And it's not like they came out of nowhere to win the first Monaghan in 10 years. They have been there and thereabouts. So it was a surprise. It wasn't a surprise that they won it. It was a surprise that the gap they won it by. But I couldn't. I thought there was a bit more in Crossmaglen, and look, they had an off day. That happens, teams. But the frustrating thing for them is it's not like it went wrong from the start. It went wrong from the start of the second half. And I expected a bit more from a team like Cross, who have the experience they do. But look, Ballybay are good. You know, you can't take it away from them, and they played it right and took their opportunities, and that's how winning is done.
Yeah, and I feel like a key moment was how they both managed the black card, because Desi Ward was black carded in basically the second minute or the third minute, and Ballybay just stayed calm. And at halftime, Crossmaglen were 1-5 to 1-4 up. The black card comes for Crossmaglen, and Ballybay rattle off 1-5 to a point. Like that's a huge difference. I think that literally was the winning of the game.
And they went for it, you know.
Yeah.
And they had the breeze at their back for the start of the second one, for all of the second half. But that crucial period that you're referring to there, and they got good ball into Finlay, and Finlay proved that it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're smart enough to be in the right place to get the ball and make things happen and get the scores, then it's very hard to stop you. And they didn't handle him. And I was glad for Paul. We actually had him. I work in sports marketing as part of the team that organised the AIB GAA Media Day for the club championship. And Paul Finlay was one of our guests, and he was in flying form. He was really looking forward to the game, and it was great to see a guy not nervous, just looking forward to it. His debut in the Ulster Club Championship as well, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, 39 years of age.
Yeah, he missed it 10 years ago because he was on honeymoon. But yeah, like it was just a really solid performance. They looked to the manner born, but it didn't surprise me because going back to the point that I made, it's not like they've been off the pace in Monaghan. They've been there or thereabouts. They've just been maybe a little bit unlucky here and there.
Yeah. Going completely then down to the east, going to the Leinster Club Championship. Kilmacud Crokes 3-14, Naas 14 points. Kilmacud with 3 goals, one a cheeky one from Darren Mullen, a fantastic finish by Craig Diaz, and then a lovely finish by Hugh Kenny. Is the 9 points that was the difference between Crokes and Naas? What did you make of the Dublin champions?
Well, I didn't get to see this game. I did watch the highlights last night on TG Car, but I've seen an awful lot of Crokes this year for all the obvious reasons. Again, it didn't surprise me. Goals win games. It's like there's very few teams better at setting up those runners through the middle. And Craig Diaz does like to go on those surging runs through the middle and arrives on the ball at the right time. And it was a spectacular shot, a great finish, a fantastic finish. And then Hugh, took his goal well. You'd expect that from a forward of his quality. Dara, he got a bit of luck the way it opened up for him. But there was nothing lucky about how quickly he thought about it. Think of the amount of players who would just stand with that ball there for a few seconds and wait to either pass it or pop over to take point or not do what he did. I mean, that's the speed of thought there. That was the most impressive thing. It was an easy enough execution. But what was really impressive about it was how quickly he realized, this is on, rather than kind of and that's one thing Robbie Brennan loves, the manager of Crokes. I'm again fortunate enough to know Robbie pretty well. Very good player, very good manager. Crokes would be, I'll say, one of my clubs. You know yourself, if you're from the country and you live in Dublin long enough, you'll get absorbed into a Dublin club. Mine was Crokes. Now more on the hurling side, at the lowest possible level I might have. I'm not surprised Robbie's players were able to think that quickly, just given the kind of guy he was on the pitch and given the kind of coach that he is and the empowering manager that he is, that these guys take it on themselves. And that was a good example of it. But Dara, in any other county, would be your superstar inter-county player. But Dublin being Dublin and the talent they have and the depth of talent they have. We might see him feature more prominently with Dublin. But it was just a very cleverly taken goal. Kind of summed up that Crokes team. And it does help that they have Shay Walsh. People can, and look, I know people will say, well, it's your club, so of course you're going to defend it. Shane Walsh studies in Dublin. Shane Walsh lives in Dublin. So why shouldn't he play his club in football in Dublin? And it's an amateur sport, and I'm sure he'll go back to his home club. And I know it's tough for them to lose him, but clubs don't own these players. No one owns you as a player. It's not like in professional soccer or rugby where you're contracted. So I can't blame him for going off and playing football with Crokes for a season or two. It was a good performance from Crokes. Naas would be disappointed. They'd probably feel there was a bit more in them. But I think, look how close Crokes were to being All-Ireland champions last year.
Yeah.
And the thing I mentioned there about being clever and the decision making is kind of what lost them the game, the All-Ireland final. If they'd have fouled Kilruane in the lead up to that goal, then they probably would have won that game. And that comes down to just players not making the right decision. Whereas maybe now,
I personally think if they had Mannion, I think they would have won that game.
Yeah, but they didn't, and but they could have still won it. You know, that's the frustrating thing. And even when that move was happening, cynical as it sounds, but you know yourself, it is about winning at that level. I was like, take them down, foul them, pull them back, but no.
And for anyone who'd be saying, you shouldn't be saying to foul people and stuff like that, Kilruane, look at the way that, Kilruane had no problem being cynical the other way around. Every team at every level, if a guy's going through, they foul him. I mean, that's the way that the game goes these days. The next team that they are going to be playing, that Kilmacud are going to be playing, is Portarlington. They're going to be playing the same side. They're going to be playing the same side in the Leinster semi-final this year as they played last year. That is Laois's 3-in-a-row champions, Portarlington, who really squashed a Palatine side, 3-19 to 9 points. It was played in Dr. Cullen Park in Carlow. Yeah. But I mean, Portarlington played experienced veterans that have been around the block. They just squatted them down pretty easy. After a good first quarter by Palatine, Portarlington pulled away.
Yeah, it's pretty. Palatine played very well against St. Patrick's of Wicklow. St. Patrick's of Wicklow will tell you they probably didn't play anything like they can. and I would agree with that. But Palatine, it was a good performance in the night from them. Portarlington's experience certainly telling there. Pal missing a few players, like a couple of guys went off travelling to the county final. They were away with it, but you're not going to get away with it the higher up you go. And it's one of those games where the scoreline is in itself a match report. You know everything you need to know by looking at the scoreline. So yeah, was I surprised that Portarlington won? No, I thought it would be closer, especially given that it was on in Carlow. But again, in this competition at that level, when a team like Port are in form and you're not, you're going to be well beat.
Yeah. Moving on from that one, Road against Ratoath. David Brady in the wars again, fighting with the Road players. This time he said it was giving a dog a bad name. I do agree to a point, but he certainly seemed to be saying something to the Road players as they were going past.
Yeah,
now, I mean, do you need a translator for whether it was good or bad?
Yeah, well, look, the footage last night that I saw on GAA would suggest that there wasn't much to it.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I saw, and I'm only going on what I saw, it's not like there was a mad scrap or anything.
No, it was...
There was a coming together. There was no fists or whatever. Then at the end of the game, obviously, the player and the manager, and I don't know, because again, you only see a small part of it. You don't know what they're mouthing continually through the game. You don't know, were they walking away and one guy shouted over to another and then they start walking towards each other. Things get heated in a match situation. Ideally, when the full-time whistle is blown, that's where everything should be left behind. Sometimes it spills over. I think if you ask both lads today, what do you think of it? They'd say, look, just got a bit heated, and that's football, that's competitive sport. I wouldn't be going over the top about it. Neither man is shy, but I don't know if either man is guilty. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. I get what you mean. The game itself was an absolute battle. I mean, I kind of knew that it would be that way. Road are absolute experts of grinding out results in really, really tough games, but they got outdone by Ratoath this time. 5 points in a row in the second half. That proved the difference between the two teams. Ratoath hitting 5 without reply, 2 from Daithí McGowan, 1 from Jack Flynn, 1 from Cian O'Brien, and 1 from Cian Rogers. That was between the 36th and the 50th minute of the game. And Road just didn't really recover from that. They couldn't pull it back, and they lose by 2 points, and Ratoath move on.
Yeah, and Road have been a great team enough. Well, they're still a great team enough, obviously. I think Leinster has eluded them in recent years, and that's one thing that they'll probably be frustrated with. They would like to have done more in Leinster. Ratoath, under David Brady, they've been good this year. Meath clubs haven't really impressed in the senior club championship in recent years. I think you'd nearly have to go back to 2002. I think it might have been Dunshaughlin. Could have been earlier than that.
Yeah, that is Dunshaughlin, the last club to win it, 2002.
Yeah. Well, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
And there's a trend, there's a pattern. Ratoath maybe potentially a different animal, and they will look at their semi-final and say it's winnable. Them against the Downs, and the Downs will look at it and say the same. Now, I'm in this situation where I haven't seen too much of any of them. All I've seen of Ratoath is the highlights, and the Downs, I've read about them in a fantastic Luke Loughlin story. He was featured in the Sunday papers this week. I think he did an interview with Christy O'Connor. Very much worth a read. I'd be a big fan of Christy O'Connor. The man produces gold on a weekly basis. This stands out even from Christy's work, which says an awful lot about the interview and whatever. But yeah, now they've won a couple of games. They're on a bit of a roll. The Downs overcame St. Mary's. I know St. Mary's would be disappointed that it ended the way it did. I think once they won Louth, they were determined to have a good run at Leinster. They're one of those teams who, they really wanted to run in the provincial club championship. Some of them kind of turn up in it and they're like, we won our county. That's our main business done. They weren't one of those counties or one of those clubs, and they won their first round, which is great. They beat the Longford champions, but Colin Gale. But it'll be Ratoath and the Downs will look at that semi-final in Croke Park, and it's great for them. You have a lot of lads on those teams who've never played in Croke Park, which puts another angle on the game as well. It's about how you handle Croke Park, and I think that is a factor, especially when you've teams who haven't played there too much, and they'll both fancy it.
Yeah,
And then
no,
after that in the final,
yeah,
whatever
it's
happens
trying
there.
not to be too starstruck by the stadium. It's trying not to be too overcome with the moment that
Yeah,
you have
and
got there.
and there's that element, but there's also the element of getting used to new surroundings. I remember hearing from a New York player, sorry, a Galway player who played in New York in the Connacht Championship a couple of years ago, and he said the first half was difficult because the city is in your eye line in the background.
Yeah.
That's actually completely new surroundings, and it's nearly hard to adjust to the new surroundings. And for a lot of people who've played in Croke Park, and I've been now, I've never played a match in Croke Park, but I've been on the pitch and just kind of messed around. We had a charity match there once, so I won't say I played a match, but I won't say I've played in Croke Park. I've been on the pitch, and it actually does. I know that's the lowest level, and it might seem silly, but I spoke to a player about this before, and they said, you know what, you're right. A player who had played in, after that, they went on to play in All Ireland and win them and everything, but at that stage, they hadn't played in Croke Park too much, and they said, you know what, you're absolutely right. It does take you a while to maybe get your eye in and just to get used to the way the stands are and the pitch and everything about Croke Park.
Oh no, it's an absolute coliseum, really. Obviously, Ratoath doing some interesting positional switches as well. Eamon Wallace playing at centre half back. I mean, I was saying that when you look at other counties that use the likes of Jack McCaffrey, Gavin White, Paddy Durkin, Oisin Mullen, Owen McLaughlin, like as weapons going forward, Wallace's pace I always found wasn't really maximised when he was playing in the full forward line, but playing him in the half back line, he could be like an Owen Merchant type that he could carry the ball effortlessly from one pitch to the other, and he's a great shooter. Brady, 2 points again.
Yeah, I've worked with David Brady. He's an astute tactician. He really picks up on things. And Brady being Brady, he's not shy in saying it when he's doing his media work. And he's obviously not shy in doing it as a coach. And it's a really clever thing because you can unlock, like, there's one thing defenses and teams cannot mark, regardless of how many they put behind the ball or what tactics they play. There's one thing they cannot stop, and that's speed. And like, it doesn't matter what way a team sets up. If you've got speedy players who can run at them, you're going to get in behind them. You're going to create chances. And Wallace is he has that experience in county football as well, and he's well able to use the ball. So sometimes you're better off putting guys like that in a situation where they're kind of looking ahead rather than looking behind, if that makes sense. Or they're better off coming onto the ball rather than having to come back and retrieve it. And by coming onto the ball, what I mean, well, I shouldn't say coming onto the ball. I mean going forward with the ball and kicking it in and passing it in. And Wallace, now, and I haven't seen a whole pile of Ratoath, but I can imagine, given the skill sets, sorry, that's a horrible rugby word. I was watching the rugby at the weekend. Given the abilities that he has, that makes him sound like a superhero, which, of course, when you see him running, you think he is. That would suit him, I think, to be back there. And he's a clever footballer as well. He's a good footballer. Speed is just one aspect of who he is on a football pitch.
Yeah, no, he's a brilliant player. And you touched obviously on that last game. The Downs won 17, St. Mary's RD 12 points. The Downs again looking impressive. Luke Loughlin, I think it was 6 points from play or 5 points from play from him, shining really, really strongly. And then they've got some quality players in there, Kevin O'Sullivan and the like. I mean, really, really promising from the Downs. Them against Ratoath, they'll fancy it.
They will. And that's what I was saying earlier on, that they'll both see it as a winnable game. Now, the Downs, I won't go into too much detail because I would be really bullcrapping you if I did. I haven't seen them once this year, read a few match reports. Looking forward to seeing their game against Ratoath. But Luke Loughlin's story is amazing. You know what? Rather than, I think a lot of people might know already, like, Luke Loughlin has told the story himself. Didn't treat himself particularly well, wasn't in a great place mentally. And with a lot of help from Jack Cooney and his Westmeath teammates, got himself right. And hopefully will stay right. And you want him to stay right because, like, obviously he's a very good footballer. Comes across as a very straight and honest lad, and was unbelievable this year in the Tailteann Cup. And yeah, it's good to see someone like him who's had the battles he's had flourishing.
No, I 100% agree with you there. They were very impressive in this game. They were 1-8 to 5 points up at half time. An early goal from Kevin O'Sullivan that really set them on their way, and they never looked back. Before we wrap up on the football action, of course, the last one, Newcastlewest down in Limerick, they became only the 9th club to retain the title from last season. Something that speaks to how competitive the club championship is around the country. Like, only 9 teams managed to retain it. They beat Adare by 111 to 2-5 after extra time. A very low scoring game with 3 points in the second half of extra time from Ian Corbett, from Cian Sheehan, and from the full forward McMahon. That set them on their way, and they're Limerick champions again.
Yeah, and congratulations to them. It's a hard-fought championship. And now that they've got that title, they might fancy their chances in Munster. But Ian Corbett, class act, always has been. Like, Limerick have always produced great footballers. And it's always been a case of, can they organise them? And Billy Lee did that for a number of years. And look, I watched them against Kerry in the Munster Championship. Obviously, they're off the top teams. But there's enough in there to suggest that they can stay at the top tier, or that they can, like, they're in Division 2 next year, which is going to be a big challenge for them. But yeah, delighted for Newcastlewest. It's a great time to be in any town or to be part of any club to win a county title.
Oh yeah, without doubt. I thought that they were very impressive in terms defensively. I mean, holding it to 5 points. I would be worried for them going forward, though, scoring as low as they did. They're going to need to score more than 8 points in a full game.
Yeah, they are, but at this time of year, and especially in finals, they can be very low scoring. Teams cancel each other out. You've got the nerves of finals. Also, football and rugby and hurling and everything, anything that's played on natural grass slows down at this time of year.
Yeah.
And the net effect of that in hurling and Gaelic football is probably that you get less scores. And you'll see games kind of, especially football, because in hurling, you can score from your half back line. You can hit long range shots and whatnot. Like we saw that in one of the Galway semi-finals over the weekend. I can't remember the exact incident, but again, on GAA last night, guy scoring from around his own 45. It's not obviously something you can do in football. So, like, look, I think the primary thing is that they won the game. I don't think they'll care if it was by 1 point. And I think, look, if they need to, or a game opens up, then maybe they can find out. Was that game played in particularly bad conditions?
Yeah, it was tough conditions, yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, that's you nearly ignore the score line and just concentrate on the result when that happens. It's all about winning, especially like in bad conditions. Very, very difficult to get scores in football, especially in a county final.
Yeah. Just before we wrap up, there were two LGFA football finals which happened over the weekend. Kilmacud Crokes beat Tinahilly by 4-15 to 8 points. Remarkably, Éabha Rutledge hit 3-1 from play, was named player of the match, deservingly so. Kilmacud Crokes winning the first ever Leinster club title of their history on the ladies' side. And the other final, Ballymacarby, 8 points, Banner Ladies, 5 points. Ballymacarby have 41 Waterford titles in a row, and they've only converted a Munster title now for the first time in 22 years. They'd lost 11 Munster finals in those 22 years. They managed to get over the line. What do you make of these two games?
Well, firstly, with Ballymacarby, Ballymac as we call them for short, it's a phenomenal thing that they've done, achieving 41 counties in a row. Now, what happens when you win that many counties in a row? People say, well, it's not worth winning. If one team can dominate, then it's obviously not a good championship and you don't really deserve credit for that. I always thought that was a harsh theory, because they work incredibly hard. It's not their fault that no one has beaten them. It's not their fault that no one is able to come and take what they've got. And so I really felt for the group itself, to get the credit that they deserve, they had to win a Munster or another one. They hadn't done it in 22 years. And well done to Michelle Ryan, by the way, who was full back the last time. I think they won her, was she wing back, and was full forward the other day. Daughter of the legendary Michael Ryan, who was a Waterford senior hurling manager. He also managed the Waterford ladies to All-Ireland titles. And that was an iconic team in Waterford, because they were the first ones to kind of show us the way. They were the first ones to give us great days. So that's why I always have an affinity with ladies football, more so maybe than a lot of guys my age, because I always appreciated what they did and the work they put in and whatever. And Ballymacarby were a huge driving force in that as a club. A lot of the players would have come from there. And when they beat Mourneabbey in the quarter final, I knew they were probably onto something, because they were getting to finals and they were stumbling against the likes of Mourneabbey. So when they did that, I was like, whoa, something serious going on here. And funnily enough, it nearly got easier in Munster from there, because they didn't win Munster by winning that game, but certainly it suggested that, oh, maybe there's something different this time. So I knew when they did that, that was a big deal. So I'm delighted for them. Regards Kilmacud Crokes, it was their first time in the Leinster Championship. It was their first time to win the Dublin Senior Championship this year. Johnny McGee, the former Kilmacud Crokes player and former Kilmacud Crokes manager, told me that the ladies football side of the club only started like 20 odd years ago, something like that. It's very young anyway. And they only kind of started because there was a few of them there who wanted to play a bit of football, his sister included. And Lauren, I think his daughter was a mascot. There's actually pictures of her as a very young child as a mascot for the team. But they came from there to win a Dublin championship, first of all, for the first time, and then a Leinster senior championship. So it's been a phenomenal year. But it doesn't surprise me. You have the likes of Laura McGee, who actually wasn't there for Leinster, I don't think.
No, she wasn't.
She was away. She was there for Dublin. She wasn't there for Leinster. Éabha, Michelle Davern, and like Molly Lamb, and a lot of other players who put an awful lot of work in for the last couple of years. Like, it would have been very easy for some of them. They got close on a few occasions, and that kind of hurt can drive you away. But if anything, it actually drove them on.
Yeah.
And once they won Dublin, I fancied them for Leinster. I'd seen them a couple of times in Dublin. I love how they moved the ball in the final against Nafina against Thomas Davis. I beg your pardon. Against Thomas Davis. Sorry, the hurlers and the footballers played Nafina in finals. The ladies played Thomas Davis. They let Thomas Davis back into it. They kind of sat back a bit. They lost their shape. But once they were able to see out that game, despite that, I said, right, this is a team who are actually going to get better as they go on, not worse.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised that they won Leinster. And look, again, as we said at the start, I've been involved with Crokes. I've seen the work that has gone on, and so much work has gone on from so many people in every aspect of the club. And I'm not surprised that this has happened because of that work. Same as every other GAA club in the world. You know, I know people say, oh, it's a super club and all that, but like that actually poses its own challenge. The logistics of trying to manage that amount of numbers and trying to get pitches and coaches and all that. That's actually a really difficult thing, and people never talk about that when they're talking about Crokes. But it's just I wasn't surprised to see them win. Yeah. I was surprised to see them win by that much, but I wasn't surprised to see them win.
Yeah, no, 100%. Oisin, absolute gentleman. Thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure, Seamus.
All right, guys, that is the full roundup of all the club action which happened over the weekend here on Play on GAA. We hope you enjoyed. Until next one, take care.